My name is Cameron, and that night when my whole family raised their glasses to celebrate my sister's engagement at one of the most expensive restaurants in Seattle, they didn't recognize me, the woman in a chef's uniform standing right in the main kitchen. An acquaintance? My mother asked, pointing at me with a look full of judgment. My manager smiled. No. That's the owner of the restaurant. And the head chef. The whole table went silent. My father nearly dropped his wine glass. They had no idea where I'd been or what I'd done for the past 5 years. Have you ever been looked down on by your own family simply because you chose a different path? Leave a comment below if you know that feeling. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to follow the full story I'm about to tell. I grew up in Napa Valley where every house seemed to have two things: a private wine cellar and an ideal of success. My family was no exception. We lived in a white-tiled villa on a hillside, its backyard opening straight into rows of green vineyards. My father was a well-known attorney, often interviewed on the radio and featured on magazine covers in his field. My mother ran a PR firm for the elite, her voice always soft, polished, and laced with comparisons. My sister, Whitney, was her greatest pride. Smart, beautiful, a Stanford graduate who went on to an Ivy League medical school. Whenever guests came over, Mother always mentioned Whitney first, as if her existence proved the Mitchell family education system. My younger brother, Chase, was like a small model built to carry on the tradition. He loved politics from a young age, was sent to speeches and leadership camps. When his acceptance letter from Harvard arrived, my mother wept as if she had won a grand prize. And then there was me. I spent most of my time in the back kitchen, where the smell of butter melting on a hot pan mixed with the scent of dried rosemary, where my heart beat differently every time the first pastry puffed in the oven. I used to think that was something to be proud of. Until one autumn evening when I was 14, and our family hosted a dinner party for important investors. What is she doing? My mother frowned as she saw me walk out of the kitchen with a tray of pear and cinnamon tarts. I made them myself. I smiled, my hands still dusted with sugar. I thought dessert might make everyone happier after the main course. Mother said nothing. But as I walked away, I heard her whisper to her friend loud enough for me to catch. That baking hobby, it's just a phase. She'll outgrow it. For the first time, my fingers felt icy even in a sweltering kitchen. But I kept cooking. Every day after school, I slipped into the kitchen with Mrs. N, the elderly Vietnamese sous chef who had worked for our family for over 10 years. She didn't speak much, but whenever my onion slices were uneven, she would gently turn my hand. Not force. Steady. Patience. I remember when she handed me a bottle of handcrafted fish sauce, telling me to make a dipping sauce instead of using soy. It doesn't matter where the dish came from. Good is good. A kitchen has no prejudice. I fell in love with cooking the way people fall in love with an instrumental piece, because it expressed what I couldn't say out loud. Still, every time I tried to share that passion with my family, I hit an invisible wall. She likes cooking? A guest asked at a Christmas party. Oh, she's just fooling around, my mother chuckled. Far from serious. My father often looked at me as though I were a puzzle he couldn't solve. Once, when I asked to take a summer baking class at the community college, he lowered his newspaper, peered over his reading glasses and said, "You were born a Mitchell, Cameron. We don't work behind kitchen counters. We own the restaurants, we don't scrub the stoves for others." That line followed me through my teenage years like a reversed mantra, making me both angry and afraid. I still remember the career orientation session at school. Each student wrote their dream job on a card. Whitney wrote, Doctor. Chase, Senator. Me, chef. When my mother saw my card pinned on the board, she quietly pulled it down. That night, I overheard her whispering to my father in his study, "Maybe I've been too soft on her. We need to intervene before she becomes a burden to the whole family." I slipped back into my room, clutching the recipe journal I handwrote every night, filled with flavors, colors, and dreams no one had ever named. Because even if they didn't understand, I knew this much. Every time I sliced a tomato evenly, every time dough turned smooth under my hands, every time I made someone smile after their first bite, that was me living true to myself. Too bad in their eyes, it was only a pastime. Not worth trading a Mitchell future for. The day I turned down Yale, my mother sat frozen for nearly 10 minutes, her hand holding a teacup as if moving would shatter everything. "You refused a golden ticket to culinary school?" she asked. My father, standing by the window overlooking the vineyards, said one thing only: call everyone. We need a meeting. That evening, the house felt heavy with a storm about to break. No one touched dinner except Chase sneaking a scoop of mashed potatoes before leaving it unfinished. We sat around the long wooden table in Father's study, a place I'd only entered when scolded for grades or behavior. Veronica, my mother, sat at the center, back straight, eyes locked on me. My father at the head, fountain pen resting neatly on a thick stack of papers. Whitney arrived 3 minutes late, still shrugging off her white coat, asking, "What's so urgent that I had to leave my shift early?" "Cameron turned down Yale," Mother replied without breaking her stare at me. Whitney froze, staring as if I'd just announced I was running away with a circus. "Yale? You refused Yale?" I nodded. "I applied to the Institute of Culinary Education in New York. And I got in." Chase looked at me, trying to gauge if I was joking. When I didn't laugh, he frowned and turned to our father. Father stayed silent. He pulled a blank check from the folder, uncapped his pen, and wrote a very specific figure: $10,000. He slid the check toward me. "Here. Call it seed money, if you insist on being a chef. But remember the condition." I looked at him, my heart pounding but my chest cold in a strange way. He wasn't joking. His face calm, his voice even, like he was reading a contract. "You will no longer represent the Mitchell family in any form. You won't use our name to get a job. You won't claim to be the daughter of attorney Donald Mitchell. If you fail alone. No arms waiting to catch you." "I have to give up my last name?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "An amateur chef doesn't need the Mitchell shadow. It'll only make people laugh." I stared at the check. The ink was still wet. That number gleamed under the light like a golden trap. Whitney folded her arms. "Cameron, do you know how many people trade their whole youth just to get into Yale? Do you know how much someone else would cherish the seat you left empty?" My mother cut her off. "This isn't about prestige anymore, Whitney. This is about the future. A kitchen isn't where you build a life. It's where you pay others to work for you." I looked up. And what if it's the only place that makes me feel truly alive? No one answered. At last Chase spoke. "Cameron, are you sure? I mean, if you fail then I'll wash dishes to feed myself." I pushed the check back toward my father. "I don't need money if it comes with denial." The corner of his mouth twitched, but his hand calmly returned the check to the folder, clipped away as if it never existed. Mother was the first to stand. "Then starting tomorrow your room will be cleared out and turned into a study." Whitney pulled out her phone, typed something, then said coldly, "Good luck." Chase gave a faint nod, his eyes avoiding mine. He was too young to understand that silence can sometimes be its own form of betrayal. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat on the floor beside a small suitcase. I packed some plain clothes, the kitchen shoes I had bought with summer job money, and the recipe journal I had been handwriting since I was 13. Dragging the suitcase down the stairs, I looked around the house where I had lived for 18 years. No one came to see me off. Only the wind outside brushed through the vineyard and tapped gently against the glass windows, as if to remind me that the season had changed. And so had I. I moved to Brooklyn on a rainy morning at the end of September. The old taxi dropped me off in front of a worn building with peeling paint and wooden stairs that creaked with every step. The apartment I rented was a shared studio with 3 other roommates, each paying about $500 a month, not including utilities. The living room doubled as dining room, bedroom, and office. If anyone needed quiet, they had to go to the hallway or a cafe. My corner barely fit a single mattress, a 3-tier plastic shelf, and the old suitcase I had brought from Napa. I hung my first chef's uniform behind the door to keep it from wrinkling. Light through the small window made the room look pleasant by day, but at night it was cold and damp. I usually had to wear 2 layers of clothes to sleep. On my first day in New York, I started job hunting. I printed more than 20 copies of my resume, hand-wrote each cover letter, and knocked on the doors of restaurants from Manhattan to Williamsburg. "Where did you graduate?" "Not yet. I'll start next term." "Any real kitchen experience?" "I helped cater charity dinners in Napa." They shook their heads, polite but firm. I was rejected 7 times in the first 3 days. Some never replied. Some said bluntly, "We need someone who can handle real pressure, not a student from a flavor arts school." That weekend I landed my first job, prep cook at a small Italian eatery in Queens. Starting at 5 a.m., chopping onions, peeling carrots, picking herbs, kneading pizza dough, scrubbing pots. I finished my shift at 11 a.m., rushed to a delivery place near home to grab orders. That afternoon, I biked across 7 boroughs, body aching, soles burning from cheap shoes. At night, I washed dishes at a small bar in Brooklyn Heights from 8 p.m. to midnight. Sometimes, when the bartender left early, I was allowed to clear glasses and pour water for customers. Once, an older woman called me over and asked, "Which college do you go to?" I hesitated. "Not yet. I'm about to start culinary school." She studied me for a moment, then said gently, "Keep your passion. But don't let it burn you alive." I never knew who she was, but her words followed me for weeks. Time slipped by like water through a cracked pipe. Quiet, exhausting, never enough to wash away the stains on my hands. I got used to sleeping 3 or 4 hours a day. One night I came home past 1 a.m. My roommates were asleep. I tiptoed to my corner, turned on a small flashlight, and opened a leftover box I had begged from the Italian place. A piece of bread, some roasted vegetables, and a broken cannoli. While eating, I checked my phone. There was a voicemail from an unknown California number. I hesitated, then pressed play. My aunt's voice came through, breaking. "Cunning. I don't know how to say this. Grandma passed away. This morning. In her sleep. Peacefully. I know you're busy, but if you can." I stopped listening. My hand dropped the phone onto the cold tile. A last-minute plane ticket cost nearly $600. I hadn't even paid rent. If I took 2 days off, I'd lose all 3 jobs. I sat there in the dark, listening to the steady breathing of strangers around me. The room shrank like an old pantry, damp, cramped, with no exit. Grandma had been the only one in my family who told me, "Cooking isn't just work. It's how you say what you're too afraid to speak." When I left home, she hadn't scolded or advised. She had given me a lavender-embroidered handkerchief. "This scent will calm you." I still kept it in my uniform pocket in the tiny space where I stored my paring knife. That night, I pulled out the handkerchief, held it to my chest, and cried, for the first time in my life, truly knowing the loss of the only person who had believed I could succeed, in any way. I still remember that night, not because of what was served, but because of the gaze of a middle-aged man sitting in the far corner under the warm yellow light of the restaurant. He ordered nothing special but ate each spoonful of risotto with strange focus, as if listening to a piece of music no one else could hear. That truffle risotto wasn't on the menu. It was my quiet twist on an old recipe, after I found a basket of forgotten autumn black truffles in the cold storage. I had asked the head chef to use them for staff meal, but he ignored me. So I cooked it at the end of the shift, shared with the crew, and personally brought a plate to table 9, the stranger, simply because he ate so slowly and I wanted to see his reaction. I didn't know who he was. 3 days later, the restaurant was featured in New York Table magazine. In a small corner of Brooklyn, I unexpectedly found a truffle risotto so flawless it pulled me back to my early training years in Milan. This dish was not on the menu. It was served by a young woman with quiet eyes but hands steady like a musician. I don't know who she is, but I know her taste did not come from books. It was born of instinct. The byline read Lauren Hale, a renowned critic known for extreme palate and merciless reviews. The news spread like wildfire. The once quiet restaurant suddenly overflowed with customers overnight. But with the wave came an undertow. The official head chef, the one who had scolded me for undersalting lasagna, suddenly claimed the credit. On Instagram he posted, "My truffle risotto recipe has made waves in the industry." I quietly read the post, saying nothing. But I didn't expect the owner, Chef Matteo, to notice. Matteo was an older Sicilian man, who had opened 3 restaurants but kept one to spare his heart. He rarely stepped into the kitchen, preferring reports and occasionally watching from the bar. One night, as I wiped the stainless counter after closing, Matteo came over, tapping the steel lightly. "That risotto, was it you?" I straightened, not denying it. He studied me for a long while, then nodded. "I knew it. Lauren Hale ate my food 3 times. He never used the word instinct. I can read him like an order slip." I clenched the rag in my hand. Matteo didn't get angry. He sighed. "Have you thought about becoming sous chef?" I looked up. "What about the head chef?" "He won't be back. I just let him go." Mateo placed a thick notebook on the counter. The first page read, Daily Prep Inventory SOP. Tomorrow you start at 6 a.m. No more chopping onions. Now you'll learn to manage those who chop onions. From that day on, I stepped into a new world. A sous chef doesn't just cook. I had to place ingredient orders, learn how to calculate portion costs, schedule staff, and check the gas stoves, fridges, and ovens before each shift. I learned how to talk to the staff with both skill and patience, especially when they came in late because of a sick child or a breakup. I kept a private notebook, writing down everything from how to divide the prep line to the exact vinegar-to-oil ratio in ceviche dressing. I learned to read supplier invoices like sheet music, finding the excess, the gaps, the places to negotiate. And I learned to listen. Like the time I saw a young prep cook toss a salad in the wrong order. Instead of scolding, I asked, "What are you trying to change?" He said, "I think if the red onions go in last, it won't be as sharp." I let him try. He was right. A kitchen isn't a place to prove yourself. It's a place to listen, to each slice of the knife, to each diner's reaction, to every detail that anyone not living inside it would overlook. After a month, Mateo called me upstairs. "Do you know why I kept this restaurant?" I shook my head. Because this was the first place I failed. I messed up plenty. But I also learned here, not from books. You're the same. Then he pointed at the accounting files. Next week you'll come with me to meet the accountant. If you ever want your own restaurant, you need to understand this. Food can make memories, but numbers keep a place alive. I still remember my first night running the special line. Duck confit with cherry reduction. The house was packed. My hands trembled slightly as I drizzled the final sauce over the plate. But when it was served, I caught the look of a woman smiling softly, closing her eyes as she tasted the first bite. I didn't need to hear praise. That moment was enough. Once, Mateo passed through the kitchen, tapped my shoulder, and spoke just loud enough for me to hear. "You have the palate of a natural. And now you're starting to have the head of a chef." I smiled and went back to dicing onions evenly. Not too hard. Not too soft. Just like I was learning to stand on my own, steady, slow, and rhythmic. The fundraiser that day was held at a large wooden estate on the Hudson River, an hour's drive from the city. Mateo told me to go in his place because they invite chefs, not beer-bellied owners. I hesitated, but he shoved the menu into my hand and said flatly, "Bring risotto and the cod. Make them remember your name." I arrived by noon, carrying 2 coolers of ingredients, utensils, and the cast-iron pan I'd used since my first year as an apprentice. No one noticed me hauling everything into the side kitchen, where other chefs were busy prepping finger foods for nearly 300 guests. When I began sautéing onions in brown butter, the scent drifted into the air, mingling with white wine and thyme. A few people paused to look over. A young Haitian cook frowned and asked, "What are you making?" "Herb-steamed cod with saffron risotto and orange zest sauce," I replied. He nodded, glancing at the finger sandwiches he was slicing. "Whoever gets to eat that will remember it for life." To me, food didn't need to impress. It needed to be real enough that no one else could replicate it exactly. Around 7 p.m. the guests began to arrive. I stayed behind a small gray stone counter near the koi pond, dressed in a clean white chef's coat, hair tied neatly, barely any makeup. I wasn't trying to stand out. I let the food speak first. The third guest lingered at my station. A woman in her 60s, dressed in a cream suit, wearing a vintage Cartier watch. Her platinum bob was cut elegantly, her eyes sharp and clear, the kind used to scanning balance sheets, not menus. She looked at the risotto, then lifted a spoon. One bite. I was used to many reactions, from polite frowns to dramatic hms. But she stayed silent. After a long pause, she asked, "Whose recipe?" "I developed it myself." "Registered it yet?" I shook my head. "Planning to sell it to a restaurant chain?" "No, why not?" I hesitated, then answered, "Because I haven't found anyone who understands it enough to keep it whole." She nodded lightly and walked away. I thought that was the end of it. But over an hour later, as I was cleaning the kitchen after service, the event coordinator came in and said a VIP guest wanted to meet me privately. I stepped out, still wearing my apron, hands stained with sauce. The woman from earlier sat at a garden table, champagne in hand. "Sit," she said, pointing to the chair across. "I'm Aubrey Sloan." I froze. Sloan Group was one of the largest hotel chains in America. I'd read her name in Forbes. I'm retired, but I've never stopped watching. And tonight I watched you. I still didn't sit. She gestured again. Do you know what's special about that risotto? It doesn't show off. It's the food of someone who knows exactly who they're cooking for. Rare. I nodded slightly, unsure what to say. Then she set a business card on the table. On the back, handwritten, "Don't sell your idea. Build it. I have a small investment fund. We back women under 40 with the ability to build sustainable businesses in food. No franchises. No fast food. Only integrity and a true palate." I picked up the card. "If you have the guts to put your name on your first restaurant," she said, "I'll be your first investor." The atmosphere wasn't tense like the interviews or pitches I'd read about. It felt like a dialogue between two people who both understood that language wasn't in words but in the exact doneness of an arboreal grain. "Why me?" I asked. Aubrey sipped her champagne, then answered softly, "Because I once was you. And no one invested in me when I was still wearing an apron in a tiny kitchen back in 1982. On the way back to Brooklyn that night, I clutched her card tightly. I wasn't sure if I was ready. But someone had seen what I hadn't dared admit, that I could create not just food, but a whole world around it. I found it on a damp April morning, a deserted warehouse, gray brick walls blotched with stains, sitting by Union Lake between two empty parking lots and a shuttered boat repair shop. The roof leaked, the concrete floor was cracked, a few rotted shelves remained, and the smell of mildew hung thick. But the light from the lake streamed through broken window frames, making the space feel like it could breathe for the first time in years. I stood there, hands in my jacket pockets, rain sliding off my hood, and whispered, "This place really is forgotten land." I remembered what Aubrey had told me days earlier at our first formal meeting. Don't choose where people nod easily. Choose where one yes is needed most. I sent her photos along with a rough proposal. A day later, her fund approved the first grant, $650,000 for construction and renovation. The restaurant's name didn't come immediately. I flipped through hundreds of dictionary pages, Latin phrases, even my old recipe notebooks. But I circled back to the first word I'd spoken that morning: fallow, a plot left idle but never stripped of its power to grow. I spent the next 9 months living almost entirely inside that project. Every pendant light I chose myself. Every glass and cup I tested by hand, checking the rim's thickness and the sound it made when clinked. The floor was made of reclaimed planks from old boats. The walls were bare brick, unpainted, only scrubbed clean by hand and brush. I didn't hire a famous architect. I invited Leo, a senior in spatial design at Pratt Institute, who had once come to the restaurant where I worked to ask for an early semester interview. Leo understood light the way a chef understands seasoning. He told me, "You don't need a beautiful space. You need a place where people walk in, drop their shoulders, and breathe easier." That was exactly what I hadn't known I was looking for. My kitchen team started with 5 people. Isla from Houston had been fired from 3 restaurants for playing with ingredients. Dev, an Indian kid only 19, quiet but chopped onions as if he were writing music. Jonas, middle-aged, once a cruise ship line cook, had quit to care for his sick wife, now back in the kitchen with hands that trembled but a spirit steady as stone. Yvette, a pastry chef, orphaned, raised in juvenile detention, but with an instinct for weighing flour like a chemist. And me, still holding a knife like a student but having to learn to speak like the one in charge. We had no fixed recipes for the first 6 months. I let everyone contribute, argue, fail, and try again. One day the main course collapsed at 5 p.m. The whole kitchen panicked. Switch. Make soup. Dev, where are the beets from yesterday? Sla, grab the basil. Jonas, redo the stock. That purple-red soup later became our signature starter on the fall menu. We called it the improvised heart. Opening day at Fallow, it drizzled in Seattle. No PR, no press, only a hand-carved wooden sign hanging by burlap rope on the glass door. Fallow, left idle to live. Tables were booked solid for the first 2 weeks on word of mouth alone. Some people passed by the lake, caught the scent of burnt orange peel in the wind, and stepped inside. Others were texted by friends, "This place isn't like anywhere else. Go." By the 3rd month, A reporter from the New York Times came, no reservation, no notice, sitting alone in the corner. She ordered the grilled sturgeon with pickled melon sauce, finished it, said nothing, only nodded at me on her way out. The next week, the article appeared on the front page of the food section. Fallow is not just a restaurant. It is a manifesto. A quiet but unyielding resistance of culinary art against the industrialization of taste. The chef here does not teach you how to feel. She steps back and lets the food whisper. I printed the article, framed it, and hung it in the back kitchen where staff sat during breaks. Not to show off. To remind us we had done something almost no one believed possible. Through all of it, I kept one thing constant. I didn't contact my family. I didn't call home. Didn't send letters. Didn't mention their names. Because I knew if I still needed them to know I had succeeded, then I hadn't truly succeeded. That afternoon, I was meeting with Yvette in the small office behind the kitchen when Celeste, Fallow's front-of-house manager, knocked gently, hesitant. There's an engagement party booking tonight. I think you should know. Celeste handed me the reservation iPad. The name glared in bold caps on the main line. Whitney Mitchell, 8 guests, central table requested. I stared at the line for a long time, the sensation like someone had dipped a chef's knife in ice water and pressed it straight against my spine. Do you want me to cancel the reservation? Celeste asked softly. No. Leave it. I paused. Don't mention me. Celeste nodded. I'll tell the staff. To them, you're a stranger. I didn't go into the main kitchen that night. I sat in the corner of the dining room behind the bar, where the light was dim enough to see everything but not be seen. They arrived at 6:30 sharp. My mother, Veronica, appeared first, wearing a refined gray cream suit, hair in a high bun, lips painted wine red. My father followed, his face unchanged from 10 years ago, cold, guarded, always walking a half step ahead of everyone else. Whitney glittered in a turquoise crystal dress, her arm linked with a tall man whose professional smile and darting eyes appraised everything like numbers on a balance sheet. Lovely, my grandmother said as she sat, her voice intentionally loud, elegant enough without being gaudy. Whitney picked well. She didn't pick, my sister-in-law whispered. Ethan suggested it. His firm hosts clients here sometimes. I almost laughed. Ethan, the one who once told me food is just a fancy way to stretch hunger, was now pitching Fallow as a prime hosting venue. The appetizers came out. I saw Marcus, my longest-serving waiter, carefully set down plates of caramelized onion tart with smoked goat cheese in front of them. Mother frowned at the small portion. This is diet food? Father poked at his plate, muttering, next time I'll bring a sandwich. Whitney giggled, dabbing her lips with a napkin. Maybe Cameron's back there in an apron stained with grease. Who knows, maybe she'll come out with the tea later. I sat still, my grip on the water glass so tight the ice clinked. The main course followed. Pan-seared duck with currant sauce, laid over thin roasted potatoes and kale salad dressed with walnut oil. Is this real duck? Father asked, holding up the slice under candlelight. Probably some organic nonsense, Mother replied. City people like these half-baked trends now. Whitney leaned toward her fiancé, narrowing her eyes. I still don't understand why you chose this place. Anyway, I appreciate you for indulging, Mother. I didn't choose. Ethan booked it, the man chuckled. But I'll admit, the food has something desperate about it. I almost burst out laughing. Every plate in their hands, every leaf, every slice, every drop of sauce, was decided by me. When dessert came, dark chocolate mousse with fresh orange sauce and sea salt, I gave Marcus a nod. Bring the check, I whispered. Right now. Right now. I draped my apron over my arm, smoothed back my hair and stepped out of the shadows. Marcus placed the black leather folder on the table just as I approached. Whitney spotted me first. Her eyes widened, then instantly narrowed, unsure whether to be startled or keep performing. Mother looked up, brows pinched, but her social smile stayed in place. Oh, Cameron. What a coincidence. I said calmly, tonight's bill doesn't need to be paid. They glanced at each other. Father frowned. Why not? I turned to Marcus. Close the table, please. Tonight I'm hosting. Marcus nodded, collecting the leather folder. No one spoke for a few long seconds that felt stretched thin. I looked around the table, half-eaten tart, duck carved to scraps, untouched dessert. Thank you all for coming to Fallow, I said evenly. It's an honor to host my own family, even if no one knew that from the start. Whitney froze. Ethan opened his mouth as if to speak, then stopped. My mother sat up straighter, gripping her glass as if it were the last thing keeping her steady. I smiled faintly, not bitter, only tired. Well, at least I got to see how you all react to the food, when you thought it had nothing to do with me. I nodded politely, then turned, walking down the hall where the kitchen lights still shone steadily. Behind me, I heard the soft clink of a spoon against a plate. And my father's whisper, "This can't be real." But it was. And that night, for the first time in years, the truth didn't need me to shout to be believed. It sat there on the table, right in front of them, on every dish they had quietly dismissed. When I returned from the main kitchen, the dining room felt like compressed air, so still you could hear a spoon touch the rim of a glass. The whole table remained in place. My mother clutched her napkin, eyes wide as if trying to decide whether what just happened was real or staged. My father leaned back, staring into a glass of melted ice. Whitney toyed with her purse strap in silence, head tilted down, the flush on her neck creeping up to her ears. Slowly, I pulled out the empty chair at the head of the table and sat. For the first time, I was eye level with them, not a shadow behind anyone else. I didn't plan to ruin the dinner, I said calmly. Truth is, I debated a long time before stepping out. My father still wouldn't lift his head. My mother tried to keep her poise. She spoke first, her voice trembling slightly but under control. "Cameron, I know. You never said anything all these years, how could I?" "It's not that you didn't know," I cut in. "It's that you never wanted to. I founded Fallow. I chose the location, raised the capital, designed every corner of the kitchen. I manage more than 30 staff, run the line every day. Every dish you criticized was built on hundreds of hours of mistakes, retesting, sleepless nights." I paused, laying my hand flat on the wooden table. "And I don't just work here. I'm opening a second location in Portland. Early next year, I'll release a cookbook with a handwritten introduction. I'm also running a mentorship program for young chefs. People like me once was. No believers, no safety net." At that, Whitney looked up. Her eyes glimmered with something close to gratitude, though she couldn't quite admit it yet. My father exhaled quietly. "You should have told us," he said, still not looking at me. "We could have helped." I let out a small laugh. "Helped me? When I asked to study culinary arts, you wrote me a check with the condition that I drop the Mitchell name. That's what you call help?" He didn't reply. My mother straightened, releasing a long breath as if gathering every ounce of courage. "Cameron, I admit, I was wrong. I shouldn't have called your passion a game. I'm sorry." I looked at her and a nameless feeling rose in me. Not relief. Not exactly anger. More like emptiness. "The question is," I said slowly, "are you sorry for mocking me? Or because I didn't fail the way you expected?" Her hand faltered. Her gaze drifted for a beat, as if not ready to face that question. I didn't wait for an answer. "I don't need anyone's apology," I continued. "But if after tonight you still want to keep contact with me as family, I need some clear terms." Every eye turned to me. First, respect. No more hints, mockery, or judgments about my choices. Second, no interference. No advice unless I ask, no attempts to redirect my life. Third, don't attach the Mitchell name to Fallow. This is not a family product. It's mine. From my hands, my decisions, and the silence you left behind. I lifted my head, meeting my mother's eyes, then my father's, then Whitney's, who was quietly nodding now as if finally beginning to understand. "If that's too much, I'll understand. I've lived just fine these 5 years without a single call from home." At last my father looked up. His eyes no longer sharp and cold, but heavy, almost weary. "I won't oppose," he said softly. "Though, it's hard to hear things like that from my own child." "I'm telling the truth," I answered. "Because this is the first time I don't need to speak to be accepted. I need to speak to be understood." My mother gently set down her napkin, folding her hands together. "Thank you for not refusing to serve us from the start." Inside me, a thin sheet of ice began to crack, not shattered but split enough for new air to seep through. A week later, on a rare rainless Sunday morning in Seattle's spring, I arrived at Moss Cafe earlier than usual. The little cafe sat tucked beneath maple trees on a quiet street in Queen Anne, a place I often went to write without interruptions. No Wi-Fi, no large tables, no fancy menu. Just creaking wooden floors, cinnamon-dusted lattes, and peanut butter toast with caramelized bananas I always recommended to first-timers. I chose my usual corner table, by the window, where the light through sheer curtains made a glass of water look like it belonged on stage. I set my bag aside, opened my laptop, and left a blank page ready for the cookbook's preface. But I didn't type yet. I waited. At exactly 9:04 the glass door opened. My mother walked in first, followed by my father, Whitney, Ethan, Chase, and the man I assumed was her fiancé. Mother wore a light gray cardigan, hair tied low, no makeup. Father in a navy polo, holding a to-go coffee cup without a lid. They looked smaller, softer, and quieter. I nodded in greeting. "This table seats 6, I said, my hand resting on the wood. "If you'd like to sit." The server brought menus. No one asked me what was good. But I noticed they all ordered exactly what I had texted them. Peanut butter toast, soft-boiled eggs, and mint herbal tea. No bacon. No syrup on the side. A while later, when the food was nearly complete, Chase cleared his throat. "Would you still take a summer intern?" I looked at him. Chase was different now. Gone was the built-in confidence of the favored youngest. His voice was steady, eyes direct, no fidgeting, no nervous gulps. "You know how to cook?" I asked. "Know how to peel potatoes without cutting off my hand," he grinned. "Know how to clean a stove and tell burnt oil by smell." "I'm not asking for favors. I just want to learn." "All right. But at Fallow everyone does prep. Up at 4 a.m. 10-hour shifts on the line. No cushy office." "That's the point," Chase replied. My mother smiled, a small, quiet smile unmasked. I looked at her, saying nothing, but inside I softened. For the first time, she wasn't trying to rewrite the story I was telling. Through the meal, we didn't revisit the past. No one mentioned that night at Fallow. No one offered another apology. But I saw Whitney slide the last banana slice onto her fiancé's plate, and my father folded his napkin carefully as if bowing to the truth. As they stood to leave, Chase turned back. "I'll send my official application tomorrow. Won't use the Mitchell name, don't worry." I laughed. "Use whatever name you want. As long as you don't quit halfway." They left. I stayed as the cafe grew quiet and the light softened on the table. I opened my laptop, placed my fingers on the keys, and wrote, "I once thought I had to cook to be acknowledged. To create the extraordinary just to earn a place at the table I used to stand beside. But now I cook to live. And live to decide the flavor of happiness for myself." I typed one more line. "I don't need apologies. Only space enough to breathe, to listen to my own palate, not anyone else's." I sat still, fingers on the keyboard, eyes on the window. On the sidewalk, a young couple walked in hand. The woman ordered a latte. The man asked, "Do you want to try what Chef Cameron always recommends?" I smiled. The book wasn't printed yet. The second restaurant hadn't opened. But I knew I already had a kitchen that was mine. Not because it was famous, but because it was warm enough for me to serve my own food, without hiding my name. I don't know if my mother ever came back to look for me, or if she ever regretted that sharp turn at gate 24 years ago. I stopped waiting for anyone to return. What I call family now is found in those who remain. It's choice. Those who stay when everyone else leaves. The teacher who gave me my first hot meal. The bookstore owner who hired me for my first part-time job. The old neighbor who gave me her microwave after seeing me eat instant noodles all week. We can't choose where we're born, but we can choose where we belong. And what about you? Have you ever been left behind? Have you ever rebuilt yourself from pieces no one else valued? Leave a comment below and share your story, because sometimes having just one person understand is enough to keep you moving. If this story spoke to you, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next chapters, where together we'll listen, heal, and rediscover the meaning of family. We'll meet again in another story, another journey, but always where the heart is heard.